New to milling wheat, and maybe you want some advice. Well, this is the video to watch to get some advice from someone who has been milling for well over a decade, and I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. This video is actually part 4 of my home milling 101 series. And if you haven't watched the first 3 videos, I will be sure to be linking the playlist down below. One of my most popular videos on this channel is actually not a recipe video, but it is my 5 things I wish I knew when I started milling. And that was done a couple years ago when I first started this channel. So now it's basically time for an update. Now this is going to be new things. So if you haven't watched that video, I'll link that one below so you can check out those 5 things. And then these are just some new tips. Now I'm going to be giving y'all 6 tips. So let's get started. The first tip I have, and this is a big one, and it may even be controversial, but it is ignore sourdough for now. Sourdough is tricky, even when just with all-purpose flour, but with all-purpose flour, it is far easier than using freshly milled wheat. Even if you're already a seasoned sourdough baker with all-purpose flour, it is still a different ball game when you switch it over to real whole grain flour when you actually mill it yourself. So the real benefit, and I've done a video about this before, ultimately the benefit we're going for with consuming freshly milled wheat instead of store-bought flour are all the nutrients and all the vitamins that we get when we mill the wheat ourselves. And ultimately, in my opinion, that is so much more important than just having sourdough for the sake of having sourdough. But right now, shelve it for now. Just get used to how freshly milled grains work with commercial yeast. It's okay. You're still getting tons of benefit. So just shelve that for now. Get used to freshly milled grains and then pick up sourdough when you feel comfortable with it. Advice number 2. Another thing that may be controversial, and that is right now, ignore ancient grains. If you're new to milling wheat, I would recommend you not just jump in using ancient grains. And again, it's like sourdough, ancient grains can be kind of tricky to use. And again, it's one thing to use them in an all-purpose format. That's been sifted, the brain and the germ have been removed, so it's kind of more white flour with the ancient grain. And you may find that if you've used that before that, hey, this is no problem. But again, different ball game when you're actually milling it yourself. Now, they are excellent grains. I love ancient grains, but I would, again, start with the easier flours, which is more of our modern wheat varieties, hard red, hard white, and soft white wheat. Get used to those, get to see how these recipes should be, and then branch out to your ancient grains. Number 3, and this is some tough love from Grains and Grit here, and that is I do recommend kind of making sure that you have thicker skin right now. And what I mean by that is this is mainly for those who are trying to convince their family to give up their white flour, their white bread, or maybe just get them on board with bread, period, and using freshly milled wheat and real whole grains. And you may find that you have to go grow a thicker skin because at first they may not be a fan. They may hate what you are baking. They may not want to give up their fluffy white bread, or they still might think that bread is the evil of all evils. Don't take this personally. It's not a personal attack against you. It is obviously a disagreement that they have. But another thing to consider is that if they are rejecting the bread, it's possible that it's just not good, and this is where the tough love comes in. If it's just a bad baked good that you have cranked out, no one's going to want to eat it. And again, that's not a personal assault on you. Just, okay, laugh it off. We really jacked up this recipe. Let's feed it to the chickens because they will love anything that you give them, and learn from the mistakes and move on. But just don't take it personally if your family or your loved ones are rejecting it because either they're just being, they just don't want to give up the white fluffy flour, or the fact that maybe the recipes just aren't that great. So again, the advice with your family rejecting is don't nag, don't sit there and beat them over the head with this. That's just so healthy. That's not going to change anything, especially wives, your husbands. No husband has ever crawled out from a nagging wife to become a better man. So if he still wants to have his junk food, his white bread, let him. It's okay. Just, make the recipes, and eventually he's going to smell that homemade baked bread. And whenever you really start getting good, he's probably not going to be able to resist, especially chocolate chip cookies. No one's ever been able to really deny good chocolate chip cookies. I'm just saying. We're just going to put a pause right here. So for those of you who may be new to milling grains and you're wondering like, yes, Felicia, I would like to do this because I want bread back in my life, or I can't handle white bread from the store, but I think I can handle this bread. And so what do I do to get started? I've got you covered. You need a grain mill to mill your grains, and maybe you want a mixer and you need to know where to find the grains and the yeast and the salt and all the things in the bread pans. And I recommend Pleasant Hill Grain. I love Pleasant Hill Grain. It's one of my favorite places to shop and a one-stop shop for all of us here, all of us grainies here. They are the sponsor of this video. They do support our channel, and I love them because not only are they a small company that helps us to not support Amazon and Walmart and all the big people, but they have excellent customer service, and they are the cleanest wheat berries that I have ever received to this date. As of this video, the cleanest ones I have seen. So be sure to check out Pleasant Hill Grain. You just go to grainsandgrit.com/PHG, and thank you so much, Pleasant Hill Grain, for supporting us and for being out there for all of us grainies. All right, advice number 4, and this kind of piggybacks off of number 3. And that is that there is more to freshly milled wheat and consuming whole grains than just your typical sandwich yeast bread loaf. Branch out. Cookies, muffins, pancakes, waffles. You may never convince someone to give up their white store-bought bread, sandwich bread, for a homemade, freshly milled wheat sandwich bread. I mean, it's possible that just may never happen because it is different. It is different. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, it is different. But there's so many other ways that you can feed your family these amazing whole grains without just your typical sandwich bread. And some of these recipes are easier. Muffins, super crazy easy. And then you also have, anything you use flour for, you can convert it to freshly milled wheat. So again, your cookies, your baked goods, your cakes, waffles, pancakes, if they're rejecting the yeast bread, that's okay. Feed them something else. See what they like. Every family is different, and go with that. So just don't limit yourself and realize that there's a whole big world out there. Now, advice number 5 is kind of also going with the family not being on board. And this is one that I recently got from Jamie Balmain of findingjoyinyourhome.com. I did an interview with her, and this was brilliant. And so I had to insert it into this video. And that is, if you, with getting your family on board, one thing that she recommends is actually don't focus so much on like converting their favorite recipes. So for example, if they are loving peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and you're trying to convince them to use, a sandwich loaf with freshly milled wheat and they want their Wonder Bread, stop focusing so much about converting something that's their favorite and just go with something new. Find a new recipe. It could be muffins, brownies, cookies, donuts, something. Bonus points if you make it together, but try just a new recipe. So to them, it's just a new recipe that you're doing. And now you're just using freshly milled wheat. And try that and see how they like it. They actually might love that recipe and, always reject your yeast bread loaf. It just always depends. But I thought that was brilliant advice that I wanted to pass along. And finally, number 6, and this is, I'm just going to repeat because it's a repeat from my first video because it needs to be repeated because I think this is my number 1 piece of advice. And that is when you are starting out with freshly milled wheat, start with one recipe. Specifically, the one recipe I suggest starting out with is kind of your recipe to rule them all. So for me, that is my simple yeast bread loaf recipe. I will link that down below. But from this one recipe that I mastered, I then can make pizza, pizza dough, rolls, hamburger buns, hoagie rolls. I can make so many different things from this one recipe once I mastered that. And so I do recommend, just starting with one recipe, mastering it, and then adding something new. And this is especially true if you are brand new to baking and you have never baked in your life before. You can branch out later and have like a recipe for hamburger buns, a recipe for pizza dough, but that can be just overwhelming at first. So again, start simple and just slowly start building your repertoire of recipes. What my family likes may not be what your family likes. And again, that's okay. Every family is different. So start learning what you like, what your family likes, and then just start building the recipes that you can draw from. Oh, a bonus piece of advice. I know it said 6, but I wanted to insert a bonus here. And that is to don't be afraid to not go with what everyone says with a particular grain. For example, the popular grains, are hard red or maybe hard white, and maybe your family hates hard red wheat. That's okay. Go with hard white wheat. Or maybe your family hates spelt or something like that. Do not be afraid to just ditch a grain. It's okay. The beauty of milling your own wheat is we actually have a huge variety of grains to choose from. So if there's just one or two that your family doesn't like, it is okay. It may be oats. It may be corn. It may be rice. I mean, that's okay. Do not feel like you have to use everything, or my friends, they use spelt for everything and I have to use spelt. No, you don't. It's okay. It's okay. Do you need to find out what you like, what your family likes, and go with that. And don't be afraid to ditch one of the grains. So that's it, y'all. Hopefully this was a helpful video for y'all. This was fun to make, to kind of come up with different pieces of advice. Again, I will link below the playlist for all the videos in this series. And another thing to mention for all you newbies is I do have a free newbie milling guide for y'all to download that has the most the frequently asked questions that I get asked, a kind of a step-by-step of how to get started. That I'll link for you down below as well. As always, thank you so very much for watching, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Bye.